Hi there. Welcome to Have You Asked Your Dad? The podcast where we ask questions that dads normally don't get asked. My name's Terrence Mentor, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Sean Lewitz. In today's episode, we ask the question, what are you afraid of? So, have you asked your dad what he's afraid of? Or if you are a dad, have you thought about that question yourself? Of course, if you have a question that you think dads should be asked, you can send it through to our Instagram account at Have You Asked Your Dad? Or you can send us an email at hyaydpod@gmail.com. That's hyaydpod@gmail.com. But right now, though, it's time for us to answer that question. What are you afraid of? Good Friday morning, Sean Lewitz. How are you?
I am happier than a dog with two tails. How are you?
I'm assuming that's very happy. I
mean, if you think about a dog, if it's happy, it's wagging one tail. And just imagine what it would look like if it had two. So,
that's just things knocked off tables. That's
ecstatic.
That's just madness.
Euphoric. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you're ecstatic and euphoric. That's a good way to have to be living on a cold Friday morning like we have now.
Maybe we should pay a little bit of a tribute to the coffee that's in my hand, though. That might have something to do with it.
It has definitely played an MVP role in your mood this morning.
Shout out to the coffee. Woohoo! Achbart is in my cup, I think. Yeah, it's good.
So I thought for this week, the question that we should be asking dads is, what are you afraid of? That is something that I don't think we ask dads a lot, because dads are so kind of supposed to be strong and fearless in the face of adversity and protecting their families. So like the kids and the wives and the partners are allowed to be scared, but they are always like, you don't have to be scared if dad's here, like that kind of thing. But this might come as a shock to some people. Dads are human, and we are afraid of things. So yeah. I'm going to throw it your way first. When I ask that question, what are you afraid of, other than fear itself? What comes to mind?
Yeah, the first thing that I want to say is that the title of this podcast, although it is very much about have you asked your dad about X, Y, or Z, it also feels like a phrase that I've heard my mom say to me when I would ask a question, and she would sort of buy herself some parental time and say, have you asked your dad? Giving them a chance to sort of do the 1-2 and then come back with a solid answer. So I'm loving that. And in this case, if there was something that my kid wanted to do, I would probably also want to deliberate a little bit longer, because I would have a fear about what it would mean for them, right? Can I go to said party? May I sleep out at night? So-and-so's going to blah, blah, blah over the weekend and has asked me to come with. I'm like, I'm not sure I'm ready to make that decision yet. So in terms of the fears, I think there's definitely fear around my kids and how they would experience the world. But myself as an individual, I sat still long enough to think about what I'm afraid of. If I were to sit still long enough to think about what I'm afraid of, I think the list would be exceptionally long. And I know we only have a very short time for this podcast. So I'm going to dive in real deep, real quick.
Okay, go for the big stuff right away.
I'm scared of losing my mind. I've watched my gran lose her marbles. She had dementia and Alzheimer's. And I think there's always been this, somewhere deep down, I've been scared I would get a disease or an illness that just cannot be fixed. And as someone that has relatively, what's the word I'm looking for? As someone that has a relatively strong mindset and can power through things, I think that would take me down. I have watched episodes of Breaking Bad recently. I don't know if you've seen the show.
Yeah.
But he has cancer, and I'm watching him do this and go, I don't know that I would be strong enough to get up each day. And that scares me. That scares me to think what will eventually make my mind go, nah, can't do it anymore. It's not worth it. Yeah, that's a scary thing for me.
Yeah, because you're quite a cerebral guy, right? Like, you're quite thoughtful and you process things quite, internally. So I can imagine that, your brain for you is like your power tool. and the idea of losing that like superpower or your power tool would be quite scary. Oof.
And to that point, you're quite right, because I went through burnout in 2019, 2020. It was beginning of 2020. End of 2019, I felt myself losing my personality, and that was very scary. And it's not something that I ever considered would happen, and it wasn't a fear that I could, it's not written in a textbook, snakes, spiders, sharks, losing your personality. You don't have a frame of reference of what that's going to be like. And then as it disappeared and I didn't want to have conversations with people, I didn't feel like myself. That brain, that cerebral, that analytical, that overthinking, I just didn't do any of it. There was no creativity. There was nothing. And that was exceptionally lonely, being honest. And it's a scary space to be. And I didn't even get into what many would say is depression. They spoke about doctors and therapists said to me, you're approaching that. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want that. I have an idea of what that might be, but I don't want that.
Yeah.
So that was very scary. And I suppose now I have a frame of reference to back up all the other fears I've had up until then about getting a disease or getting an illness that I cannot reverse.
So all that did was validate your fears. It wasn't it's not that bad, I can handle it. It's like, no, it is that bad.
Oh yeah. No, it just super reinforced exactly what I had been thinking up until then. So yeah, good luck to me and my family. Hey.
Yeah. I mean, look, you're getting older, so I guess as you
Thanks,
age.
Terrence.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, we're all. That's the way time works. We're all getting older. It was Eli's 7th birthday yesterday. He's getting older. It's weird. But what I mean by that is like it's kind of inevitable that hopefully Alzheimer's or dementia isn't in all of our futures, but you do start to be less sharp, and I can imagine that must be something that you kind of struggle with, knowing now that this is one of your fears.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up and pointing it out so beautifully after I told you what I'm scared of.
It's like,
let's ask you that question now.
Yeah, it's like the thing that you're afraid of, it's inevitable. Hey, by the way, let's move on. Sorry.
Exactly.
I'm so sorry. This is why I'm not a therapist. I would be the worst therapist in the world. I think for me, if we're sticking with the hard stuff and also like the more mental stuff, I worry that my kids are going to have the similar mental health issues that I had as they grow up. So I struggled with anxiety, I struggled with depression, I still struggle with ADHD, and a lot of that went undiagnosed when I was younger. Because schools and my parents, like, mental health wasn't something that we spoke about for teenagers when we were going to school, right? Like, it wasn't a thing. It only really became a thing that people started talking about in my 20s. And even then I was like, oh no, I'm fine. Everything's hunky-dory, even though it clearly wasn't. And I really don't want that for my kids. Like, I don't want it to be something that is undiagnosed and that they're struggling with quietly. But I also don't want it to be something that they have at all. So I'm super hyper aware of like any sign of like, oh, he doesn't want to go to school, or like he's pretending he says he's feeling sick or he has a stomach ache. Oh, that's a sign that he's struggling with anxiety. So like, what's going on there? And I almost overreact to these things because these are all symptoms of my anxiety when I was going through school. And this is one of the problems. Like it's like a double-edged fear. On the one side, I'm afraid that they're gonna be struggling with these things, and it's gonna go undiagnosed, and I'm gonna miss it as their dad. I'm just gonna miss it. And on the other side, I'm afraid of overdiagnosing them and being too sensitive to it, because also kids are kids. Kids sometimes don't want to go to school. Sometimes kids have stomach aches. It's not like a issue. It's just something that you have to help them work through. But that fear of not knowing where that balance is quite hectic. The other side is also like, I'm also worried that I'm not going to help them achieve everything they can achieve. So on the one hand, I'm like, so for me, all my fears are very like spectrum based. Like on the one hand, I'm worried that I'm going to not help them be everything they can be. But on that same spectrum, I'm worried that I'm going to be the guy who pushes them too hard. So it's, we're like finding the balance. It's a fear of balance. Now that I'm speaking about it out loud, I'm fearful that I don't have the balance right.
And balance is something that I've heard other people say this, Terence. It's not somewhere that you stay very long, because once you've got your balance, something forces you off balance again. So it's never really something that you achieve as an ultimate destination. It's something that we constantly strive for. If we look at a work-life balance as another example, the one is always going to push harder or pull a little bit more than the other. And you're quite right, trying to find some form of middle ground that you're not pushing too hard, but you're also not pushing them enough. Can I ask you, what advice have you received then, or have you implemented anything, any tools to find that I'm giving it enough? I don't have to give it any more. I know when to pull back.
Um, no, no. I think again, I'm fortunate that I have a great parenting partner in my wife Julie. So we have very different things that we struggle with and anxieties around our boys when it comes to their achievements and schooling and that kind of thing. So we kind of keep each other in check. Like when I'm zagging, she's zigging, and when she's zigging, I'm zagging, which is really helpful because we can go, hey, just a reminder. When he's playing rugby at 8 years old, it's about fun. There is no thought of a Springbok career at 8 years old. If we do that, we're going to ruin rugby for him. If he drops some marks, if he goes from 82% to 78%, I know it looks like he's going from an A to a B, but a B is still really good. So he's fine because also he's 8 years old. So like there's trying to keep that balance has been really useful when you have someone else to counterweight on. And I kind of feel like the analogy I have in my head is in a seesaw. It's really hard to balance on a seesaw by yourself. You need your opposite, and so that's been really helpful with kind of calming me down, and also for her to kind of step in and say, "Hey, Terence, you're doing a good job. You're a good dad. Like, trust your gut. You're doing a good job," and that helps me to be confident that okay, right, we've spoken this through. The way I reacted, that thing was appropriate. Good job. But I still think that ultimately I'm still going to be paying for my boys' therapy when they're older. I think it's inevitable. I can't imagine a world where I don't mess up in some way. I think
it's probably a good thing. We're aware of the fact that we're going to mess somebody else up, and it's not intentional. We're doing our best. And it's going to be received how it's received. I mean, they often say some way somebody's therapist knows about you, and it's probably true.
Yeah.
Probably true.
I mean, look, my parents thought they were doing a fantastic job, and they did do a fantastic job, but I still needed to go to therapy. So It's not an indictment on them.
Yes, and maybe that's the thing. It's not necessarily saying that your parents did a horrible job. I am still an individual, and not everything that I feel and do and see and absorb and process and think through is because of what you did or didn't do. I'm still my own human being, and maybe as parents we also need to realize that we're giving our kids the best that we possibly can, and we think we're doing a great job, and we are. Pat ourselves on the back because we are doing a great job. Terence, you're a great dad.
You too.
Thank you. And just processing through that. What are the things that I've done to help my irrational fears? Well, I suppose identifying that they're irrational. I mean, is it irrational that something's inevitably going to happen and worrying about it? It is a little to the point of it hasn't happened yet. So in that sense, when I do get myself a little stuck in a what if cycle, and when this cycle, I do sit still. Well, I struggle to sit still, but I do stop and remind myself that there's nothing to fear yet, because I'm now creating a reality that hasn't yet materialized. And in over dramatizing what might or might not happen, all I'm doing is paralyzing myself. And that's not helpful. And I guess that's how I sort of talk myself out of it. But if I were to lose my mind, would I be able to do that?
Would you would you have the cognitive function to think that through? I suppose also
Yeah.
the idea that it's not inevitable. I mean, I was joking about I know lots of people in their well, I don't know lots of people. I know a few people in their 90s who are completely with it, sharp as a button, smarter than I will ever be. So it's not inevitable. But if it does happen, there is a case of it being, you can't control that, and so therefore, why even worry about something that you can't control? Like you're saying, you can control the here and now. You can control what your life is like right now by not worrying about it. But if it happens, it happens. So it's not like your physical health where you have some level of control in the quality and longevity of your life. But even with that, if you're gonna have a heart attack, you're gonna have a heart attack.
Yeah, and if we're gonna scratch at that itch, I mean, I do sometimes have a very real concern, not a fear, that my physicality will not be able to keep up with what my child needs. As we know, Zoe has developmental delays. She's still being picked up and carried and moved. She's dependent on me to do a lot of stuff for her. So when I get a niggle in my shoulder or my neck or my lower back starts to ache, I'm like, hang on a second, 40-what-year-old you need to go in and do something so that you can still lift, carry, move, and be physically active up into your 50s and 60s, because that's not that far away. And where, what can I do with regards to that? So there I feel like I should be doing a little bit more. That's a concern, not a fear.
But again, there's a level of control over that, and also a level of not control, because so you also have the body that you have, and I think a lot of these fears are just even with mine, with like my children having mental health issues, there's a level to which I can't control what they maybe innately have. I can help them work through it. I can be, all the things I can put safety spaces. I can make space for them to experience that in a safe way, to get the help they need. But I can't reach into their brain and rejiggle the neurons and make everything better. If I did, I would have made them listen to me every day. Parenting would have been so much easier.
So much easier. Yeah.
But it's almost one of these things, and maybe that's the problem with fears, is that it's pretty much all the things that we have no control over that we're like the most afraid of.
Yes, and speaking of things that you cannot control, animals with more than 2 legs, because creepy crawlies. Sitting right there, a spider is fine, but it must not move.
Yeah.
And if it does, I should be behind at least a pane of glass. Then it's okay.
These mindless drones that do things. Ugh.
Yeah, no, I can tell you a quick story. I'll try and keep it quick. When we were still dating, my then girlfriend, now wife, phoned me up one evening and said there's a spider in her house. And when I got there, because being the loving, doting boyfriend that I was then and have continued to be into my husbandship, as I was handed the fellowship ring, the honor was bestowed upon me. I drove from my flat at like 7, 8 o'clock at night, I think it was, and I got to her place, and I opened the front door, and she was sitting in the kitchen on the floor. I was sitting on the counter. Either way, she was huddled in a corner opposite to where the spider was, and she just pointed in the direction. Rain spider sitting on a curtain, and I walked. I couldn't think what I was going to use. I didn't have stuff in my flat at the point that I was going to kill spiders with. I walked in with an empty yogurt container and an empty packet of cereal stuff, and she's like, "Are you making it breakfast? What on earth are you doing?" My idea was to catch the spider in the container and then carry the container out, which I successfully did after it ran around the room a few times. I did it.
No.
I did it. Okay. And as I reapproached, like I carried it then over the road, emptied it out, very humane. And as I approached her flat again, and she stood in the doorway and she's like, "Is it gone? Show me the empty container from where you stood." And I turned and I showed her the empty container. And as I did that, I looked above her head, and there on the wall
was another one.
Because rain spiders travel in pairs, my friend.
No! Oh, horrible. Oh, the horror. Now, you see, at least with that story, you were the brave hero, because I have a thing with cockroaches. I
Oh.
I can't. I can't. People will tell me stories about cockroaches, and the hair on my arms will like raise up. Like
Really?
I have a complete uncontrolled body reaction to cockroaches. And we recently moved into this. Well, not recently, almost a year ago now. We moved into this house, and we had some sewage issues, some blocked sewage drains. And I opened up where the blockage was, and it
Oh
was
my word.
it was quite full, and it was just basically cockroaches everywhere, and like the big sewage boys, like the size of your thumb ones. And I freaked out. I called my wife and I said, I can't do this. I can't unblock this drain because of the cockroaches. So she had to call her dad, who is in construction, and he had to come and unblock our drains for us because I literally could not. I was standing in my front yard, completely frozen in fear. Like I couldn't get my body to move towards the hellhole of cockroaches. And even now, if a cockroach runs across our floor, which luckily we have cats, and I think they've caught all the cockroaches for us. But the times that they've done that, I'm like your girlfriend at the time was on the corner, as far like literally I'm jumping on the couch with a broom and a can of doom in my hand, and I must say there is a level of like feeling quite emasculated when you're like, Julie, please come get the little cockroach.
How to get Terrence to reach the high notes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, throw a cockroach in the room. I used to feel like, no, I have to deal with this. And I was like, no, you know what? There's nothing wrong with having a fear of cockroaches. My wife doesn't have a fear of cockroaches. She can go and deal with it. She has a really hectic fear of mice and rats. So if we have to deal with that, I deal with that. There's a lot of gross, weird things that she can't deal with, I deal with. This is my thing. She can deal with it, and she's more than happy to do it.
I am so glad you said that out loud because it is time that we just recognized and owned said fears. It does feel a little emasculating, as you say. You're like, oh, I can't believe I'm scared of this little tiny thing that's creeping around. But it's creepy, and if it creeps you out, it creeps you out.
Yeah, it's fine. And yes, there are times there were, the follow up. We had a few weeks later, we had another blockage. Julie's dad wasn't available. I realized for the sake of my family's sanitary care, I needed to unblock the drains. And in that case, there was no other option for me but to open up the drain and unblock it myself. And so I opened up the drain cover. I had a conversation with the cockroaches. I said, look, you don't like me and I don't like you. I understand that everything below the drain cover is your world and I don't want to mess up with that. But I need to tell you that if you cross the threshold, I'm blasting you with everything I've got. Okay? I'm talking... water, doom. I don't care if I have to burn the house down.
You are very mature. In your conversation, anyway, with them.
Yes. And I think they listened because they really did stay below the threshold.
Oh, wow. That's quite something.
It was a moment of like equal respect. And I just did my thing and I got out of there. And then I'm not kidding, I had a half an hour shower afterwards.
I can imagine. You may consider taking up a career as a hostage negotiator.
Laying down the law firmly, but with respect.
Stay. Don't move. Oh, and they have those little feelers on the top that sort of go independently.
No. Actually,
and then,
I'm getting the thrills.
Okay.
Like in such a crazy way.
And I suppose you get ridiculed about it as well, or are you able to take the jokes and so forth?
I can take the jokes. I think what I've realized is that actually most people don't like cockroaches.
No, we don't.
So yeah. It's not like I have a fear of like the color green or something something that's a difficult thing to avoid. But there are people who take great joy in describing cockroach stories to me, just to see me like freak out. Shame, my wife has taken real. At first, she thought it was really funny, but then she saw how like truly and deeply uncomfortable I was just hearing about it.
I'm not going to suggest it, but I'm assuming somebody has by now brought up this idea of immersing you in cockroaches to help you get over that fear.
Nope. Because now I'm thinking about them crawling over my body, and you're freaking. Nope. Nope.
All right, so you're a nope.
I'm a big nope to that. But think about it. Even like you don't have a huge fear of cockroaches, right?
Not a huge fear. No, I don't like them. I dislike their existence.
Would you cope being in a bath full of cockroaches?
Oh no. I mean that Fear Factor, whatever that TV show was called, was completely ridiculous.
Yeah. That's I would never do like one of those kind of fear factor gross because I know inevitably there's going to be a cockroach involved in one of those things, and I could not.
What about then if you were on a reality TV show and it were Survivor and they gave you one of those 300-year-old eggs? What are they called? And they said you have to eat this. I don't have a fear of that. It's just disgusting.
It's just gross.
Yeah.
Even the challenges where you have to eat as much as possible. You know, like whenever you've seen those kind of where it's like getting through, whenever like the idea of having to eat food really quickly freaks me out as well. So there's just some things that I'd like to think that I'm quite like okay with the world, but there's some things that I've happily avoided for as long as possible.
100%.
So we've gone from very big, fundamental, immovable fears to spiders and cockroaches to not eating 100-year-old eggs, which I think we can avoid. I think it's easy to avoid not eating 100-year-old eggs. So the smaller ones we're safe from, at least. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Have You Asked Your Dad? Please remember to connect with us on Instagram. You can follow us at Have You Asked Your Dad, or pop us an email to hyaydpod@gmail.com. That's hyaydpod@gmail.com. And especially if you have a question that dads should get asked, or if you want to answer the question we asked today, what are you afraid of? We would love to hear your thoughts, especially if you're a dad. What are you afraid of? We'll catch you soon. Cheers for now.